Hello! Welcome to Chapter 7 of the Lost Years of Merlin series. The Seven Songs of Merlin is the chapter we are on currently. In the last chapter, Merlin and Bumblebee went to the shore of speaking shells, and he found the wisest shell. And the wisest shell figured out how to get his mom, Ellen of the Sapphire Eyes, to the island. So, as the last we saw, they were pulling her through the mist, and so here we go. Here we go. It's called Headlong and Happily. She collapsed, sprawling on the dark, wet rocks. Her eyes were closed, and her creamy skin looked pale and lifeless. Long, unbraided hair, as golden as a summer moon, clung in ragged clumps to her deep blue robe. Yet she was breathing. She was alive. Giving the little shell a quick squeeze of thanks, I replaced it among the scraps of driftwood. Then I ran to my mother's side. Hesitantly, I reached toward her. Just as my finger touched her strong, high cheek, she opened her eyes. For a few seconds she gazed up at me, looking confused. Then Ellen of the Sapphire Eyes blinked, raised herself up on one elbow, and spoke in the voice I had thought I would never hear again. "Emrys, it's you." Though gratitude choked my voice, I replied, "It is me, Mother." At hearing me say that word, a touch of pink flushed her cheeks. Slowly she extended a hand. Though her skin felt as wet and chilled as my own, her touch sent waves of warmth through me. She sat up and we embraced. After a few seconds, she pushed back. Running her fingers gently over my burned cheeks and eyes, she seemed to be looking under my skin, into my very soul. I could tell that she was trying to feel everything I had felt in the months since we had parted. Suddenly, as she touched my neck, she caught her breath. "The Calator! Oh, Emrys, it's gone!" I lowered my sightless eyes. I had lost it. How could I tell her that I had lost it on the way to finding my own father, and that in finally meeting him I had lost even more? I raised my head. "But I have you again. We're together, here on Finkyra." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "And I have a new name as well." "A new name?" "Merlin." "Merlin," she repeated, like the high-flying hawk. A pang of sorrow shot through me as I recalled my friend Trouble, the little hawk who had given his life to save my own. I dearly hoped that he was still soaring somewhere up there in the other world. Even now, I missed the familiar feeling of him strutting across my shoulder. And the truth was, I missed my other friends as well. Friends I had known for a time, and then lost. Cairpri, Hom, Talayan, Garlatha, Ayla, the Wind Sister, even Shim, who had shambled off to the mountain weeks ago. And yes, even Rhea. I squeezed my mother's hand. "I won't lose you again." She listened to my vow, her expression both sorrowful and loving. "Nor I you." I turned toward the dunes. Bumblebee sat by the water's edge, polishing his bells on his sleeve. He seemed determined to ignore the seagulls who kept tugging on his mud-splattered cloak. The flowering harp, along with my staff, remained where I had left them in the sand. Not far beyond, the luscious red flowers swayed in the breeze off the sea. "Come," I stood, pulling my mother to her feet. "I have something to show you." We crossed over the rocky peninsula to the fine-grained sand of the beach. As we moved, arms around each other's waists, I savored the joy of walking with her again, of being with her again. And when I thought about showing her the harp, and all that I could make it do, my heart raced. I was feeling my own power now, just as she had predicted long ago. She had told me that Tuatha himself had come into his powers as he entered his teenage years, so it made sense that I should as well. After all, hadn't I already done something that Tuatha, for all his wizardry, had never attempted? I smiled to myself. Even the shifting mists surrounding the isle could not resist me. As we neared the flowering harp, she gasped in wonder. Given her affection for anything alive and growing, I was not surprised to see that it was not the harp that had caught her attention. It was the red flower sprouting from the dune. Indeed, the flower seemed even more beautiful now than after it had just emerged. The deep cup of its petals, shaped like a bell, sat gracefully upon its arching stalk. Bright green leaves, perfectly round, ringed the stem like dozens of jewels. Dewdrops glistened from the edge of every petal. "I must smell that flower," she declared. "Of course!" My grin broadened. "After all, I made it." She halted, turned to me. "You did? Really?" "With a stroke of my finger," I said proudly. "Come, let's take a closer look." As she drew nearer to the flower, my own urge to smell it grew stronger and stronger. Not just to sip a little of its fragrance, but to immerse my whole face in its petals, to drink deeply of its glorious nectar, to plunge into it headlong and happily. I hardly noticed the strange, quivering shadow that moved across the petals. Just another trick of the misty light as I had seen before. And no shadow, however dark, could possibly obscure the radiant beauty of this flower. My mother's arms fell from my waist as my own fell from hers. We continued walking toward the flower, wordlessly, as if we were in a trance. Our feet slapped on the wet sand, leaving a trail of dark prints behind us. All I could think about was breathing the flower's wondrous aroma. Only a step away, the briny breeze blew against our faces. Heedlessly, both of us bent toward the inviting cup. I hesitated for an instant, wondering if I ought to let her go first. She would enjoy it so much. Then the shadow quivered again, and my urge to smell the flower grew even stronger. So much stronger that I forgot everything else. I lowered my face. Closer. Closer. Suddenly, a green shape leaped over the crest of the dune. It crashed into me, bowling me over backward. I rolled to a stop, covered with sand, then whirled around to confront my assailant. "Rhea!" Full of rage, I spit some sand from my mouth. "Are you trying to kill me?" Bouncing back to her feet, she ignored me completely and turned toward my mother. "Stop!" she cried with all of the force of her lungs. "Don't do it!" But Ellen paid no attention. With one hand, she pulled her hair back from her face and bent toward the red flower. Seeing this, Rhea started to dash up the slope of the dune. A terrible scream arrested her, even as it froze the blood in my veins. A dark mass leaped out of the center of the flower, straight into my mother's face. She staggered backward, clutching her cheeks with both hands. "No!" I shouted to the sky, to the sea, the mist. "No!" But it was too late. My mother stumbled, rolling down with the dune. When she stopped, I saw that her entire face was covered by a writhing shadow. Then, to my horror, the shadow slithered into her mouth and disappeared. Okay, that was chapter 7, y'all. We will read chapter 8 tomorrow. Have a good night.